And besides Krishna, of course, there are many demigods, and the chief demigods are Brahma and Shiva. So Lord Vishnu is the Lord of Brahma and Shiva, and of all other Brahmanas in the material world. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it says the Supreme Lord is very favorable toward all activities performed according to Brahminical culture or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance, faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. So that's a big statement right there. Uh, it shows how, let's say, the very high bar of of uh, behavior for brahmanas. Brahminical culture, or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance, faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. So that's a very high bar. It's a very high level of behavior that one has to have in order to be called a genuine Brahmana. So, therefore, uh, Krishna himself is the example of the perfect example of a transcendental Brahmana. He is fair to everyone. He's not prejudicial, but yet he favors his devotees. So, not all Brahmanas are actually devotees of the Lord. They follow, let's say, regulative principles, but they might not be fully dedicated to the Lord. So it's a special thing it's a special type of devotee who is not only a Brahmana, but they're actually a Vaishnava also, and completely dedicated to the Lord. So, so what does it mean to perform activities according to Brahminical culture? It means one can control the senses and the mind. One is very clean. One has forbearance, meaning they're very patient and they're forgiving. They have faith in the scriptures and practical and theoretical knowledge. So when you have theoretical knowledge, it's not really, let's say, beneficial unless you can practice that knowledge in different situations. Just having theoretical knowledge, well, that's okay, but it's not really put to the test. And the test is that you use that knowledge in different situations to make the right decisions. So one thing is theoretical, and the other thing is practical use of that knowledge correctly. Okay. So let me just read this verse again one more time. O Lord, you are the supreme director of the Brahminical culture. You're considering the Brahmanas to be in the highest position as your example for teaching others. Actually, you are the supreme worshipable deity, not only for the gods, but for the Brahmanas also. So therefore, you have to be very careful when you're dealing with genuine Brahmanas because they're very much favored by Krishna. And it says in the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. There are undoubtedly many demigods, the chief of whom are Brahma and Shiva. Lord Vishnu is the Lord of Brahma and Shiva, not to speak of the Brahmanas in this material world. As mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord is very favorable towards all activities performed according to Brahminical culture or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance, faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. Well, there is the explanation of what a brahmana should be able to do if they're a bona fide brahmana. There are a lot of people, like I remember one time I was in a program and I met this person who claimed to be a brahmana, but he had a glass of champagne in his hands. And to prove to me that he was a brahmana, he sort of opened up his shirt a little bit and showed me a brahmana thread. Right. So, does that mean he's a brahmana? By the way, a thread like that only costs maybe, I don't know, 10 cents. You know. But he had the thread, right? But he also had a glass of champagne. So that doesn't make him a brahmana just because he put on, a 10 paisa rope around his neck. Uh, one has to act like a brahmana. That's basically what's being said here. That uh, the Lord is very favorable towards all activities performed according to Brahminical culture, or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance, faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. Now, the question is, did the four Kumaras act in such a way as to, you know, uh, did they act in a way of genuine brahmanas? That's the question. Because it means control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance. Forbearance means you can tolerate. Faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. Well, the way that Lord is speaking to the four Kumaras who cursed Jaya and Vijaya, the four Kumaras are basically doorkeepers of Vaikuntha, which means they were very exalted devotees of Krishna, and they were under the, let's say, the direct herders of Krishna, and they were at the door of Vaikuntha, so they're in a very exalted position. Right? So was the cursing of the brahmanas of Jaya and Vijay correct or incorrect? Now the four Kumaras are beginning to think that they might have made a mistake by over cursing Jaya and Vijay, and but they're trying to understand, what Krishna is explaining, what the Lord is explaining to them, and they're not quite sure what he means. So as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord is very favorable towards all activities performed according to Brahminical culture, or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance. Let's look that word up, forbearance, Forbearance. Who's going to look it up? Forbearance, forbearance. It's a word that implies
Tolerant,
mercy, tolerance. Yeah, go ahead.
it's patient, self-control, restraint, tolerance.
Yes. So, were the four Kumaras patient, tolerant, etc. when they cursed Jaya and Vijay? Doesn't look like it. They, sometimes sometimes a mistake is made and a person is punished way over much too much uh, uh, compared to what the offense. And so, and now the Brahmanas or the Kumaras are having a doubt. The way the Lord is speaking to them, they have a doubt because the Lord is saying, well, actually, it's my fault that you were insulted by the Jaya and Vijaya. And this is like confusing them. They can't, uh, in other words, they're starting to think that they must have made a mistake. Right? Okay. So it continues, text 18. You are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities. And by your multi manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principle. And in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally. Purport. The statement in this verse, Dharmasya Paramo Guya, refers to the most confidential part of all religious principles. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. In the Bhagavatam, also it is stated that if one does not become Krishna conscious after very rigidly executing one's specified religious duties, all his labor in following so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. Here also the sages confirm the statement that the Supreme Lord, not the demigods, is the ultimate goal of all religious principles. There are many foolish propagandists who say that worship of the demigods is also a way to reach the supreme goal. But in the authorized statements of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, this is not accepted. Bhagavad Gita says that one who worships a particular demigod can reach the demigod's planet, but one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead can enter into Vaikuntha. Some propagandists say that regardless of what one does, he will ultimately reach the supreme abode of the Personality of Godhead. But this is not valid. The Lord is eternal, and the Lord's servitor is eternal, and the Lord's abode is also eternal. They are all described here as sanatana or eternal. The result of devotional service, therefore, is not temporary, as is the achievement of heavenly planets by worshiping the demigods. The sages wanted to stress that although the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, says that he worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, actually, the Lord is worshipable not only by the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, but also by the demigods. So the question here is the four Kumaras, they come to Vaikuntha and they're forbidden by, or let's say they're stopped by Jaya and Vijaya, who don't let them enter. And then the four Kumaras get really angry and they curse Jaya and Vijaya to fall down in the material world. Then Krishna comes and says, look, this Jaya and Vijaya, they're my servants. And he hints that you can't blame them. You're going to have to blame me because they're working under my, let's say, authority. At that point, the four Kumaras get a doubt in their mind that maybe they made a mistake, right, by being so harsh and uh, you know, cursing Jaya and Vijaya. Okay, so uh, so that now we what we're getting is a long discussion. What does it actually mean to be a Brahmana, and what is appropriate punishment and what is inappropriate punishment, and uh, if someone is a representative of the Lord, they must have impeccable behavior. But if they make a decision that is not really, let's say, commensurate with uh, the uh, the qualities of the Lord, then it's misrepresentation. So, did the Brahmanas uh, over go to an extreme by cursing Jaya and Vijay? Well, after hearing Krishna speak to them, they began to have doubts that maybe they did make a mistake by cursing them. Okay, so it says here, uh, the statement in this verse, Dharmasya Paramo Guya, refers to the most confidential part of all religious principles. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion of Lord Krishna's advice in his the conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. Okay, so let's think about this. Just surrender unto me, Krishna is saying. This is the highest principle of devotional service. It's complete surrender to the Lord. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Well, it means that before you make any decision, you should first be sure that the Lord agrees with that decision. If you don't get the, let's say, validation from the Lord, you shouldn't do it. Now, in the case you say, well, I mean, I don't see the Lord. Okay, but you see the Lord also through the bona fide guru. And therefore, a disciple will never make a decision without getting the sanction of the guru. The disciple might be in so many different situations and they have to make so many different decisions, but they should always get the validation of the guru. And there are situations in which one gets perplexed. They're not sure what's right, what's wrong. And that's when you have to come to bona fide guru and get their advice. So there are many examples of this in the Vedic literature. Uh, so, like for example, uh, when the what was it? The the young what was it? Young children uh, of all right. Let me think about this a minute. Anyway, there's this situation in which was it Draupadi? Yeah, I think it is Draupadi. Uh, she uh, Draupadi, whose children were murdered. Yeah, and when the culprit was caught, uh, they asked. So when Krishna was asked, "What should we do with him?" He said, "Kill him," and it seemed to be the right thing. But when Draupadi protested and said, "No, don't kill him," because I'm a mother and my children were killed, and I'm suffering terribly. But the culprit uh, as a mother also. And although what was done was very wrong, I can't imagine uh, the suffering of the mother of this culprit, uh, and because I myself am suffering like this, I can't cause their mother to suffer like me. So it just shows the heart of a pure devotee. Uh, and there's an interesting verse that says that The devotee is always uh, sensitive about the suffering of other people by having suffered themselves. And therefore, they don't want to be in any situation where they cause suffering to another person. Yeah. So in this case, it's shocking because after so Draupadi's children were killed, uh, they get the culprit, Asvatthama, and she doesn't want him to be, uh, you know, killed. Although Krishna says, kill him. And well, she protests. And ultimately, Krishna and Arjuna, they're trying to figure out, then what do we do? And Krishna says, okay, well, let's scalp him. And there's a difference between getting a haircut and getting scalped. And scalp means that no more hair will grow in your head, and that's a sign that you're a terrible sinner. And so, more or less, they scalp the perpetrator, and and that's a way of saying that they will be cursed, and they'll never be able to function in society anymore. They'll always be an outsider because they have committed a heinous crime. So they didn't kill him, but they cursed him to always be outside of the normal society and always have a visible sign that he is a very noxious person. So that did not violate the, let's say, the uh, desire of Draupadi because they didn't kill the perpetrator. But they did something such that the perpetrator would always be an outsider from civilized, uh, you know, uh, civilized Vedic culture. So, becoming a permanent outsider is another type of severe punishment without killing the person. And maybe it's even worse because you kill a person, okay, and they'll get another body and another chance to in the lifetime to correct themselves. But you curse a person, they have to wait till the end of the cycle of time to get another body because they're cursed, ostensibly forever. Right. So it's a great, let's say, very severe type of punishment. Without killing that person, they're uh, they're outside of the Vedic culture, and they have a mark, a physical mark that they are very, let's say, uh, very cursed person. So this was the way that Krishna, although Krishna wanted to kill Asvatthama, right?
Mhm.
He wanted to kill him, and Arjuna wanted to kill him, and Draupadi said no. So they had to figure out, well, what do we do with him? So they scalped him, you know, cut off his hair permanently as a sign that he was a very sinful person. And they cursed him to live outside of Vedic society. You know? and and he had a physical sign of his head being scalped that he was an outsider at least throughout his lifetime. And also, part of the curse was he wasn't going to die until the end of the, let's say, kalpa. So that means that, he was cursed for a long, long time and an outsider from Vedic culture. So there are different levels of cursing. So rather than kill him, because Draupadi, said, look, I'm a mother, and this person killed my children. I'm suffering terribly. But the person that did this, he's got a mother. So I don't want to see his mother suffering like me. So don't kill him. Whereas Krishna says kill him and so forth. So they had to find out that they had to do something else to punish the culprit. So basically, they scalped him and cursed him to live till the end of the kalpa and be an outsider from society and basically being ostracized. You know, so that was another type of severe punishment without killing them. Okay. So the conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. That's very, very profound statement. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. What is it? Give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. In the Bhagavatam, there's also it is stated that if one does not become Krishna conscious after very rigidly executing one's specified religious duties, all his labor in following so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. That's a pretty, big statement. And everything that someone has done, in so-called religious activity, it's a waste of time if they don't come to the point of becoming Krishna conscious. Krishna conscious. After executing so much, duties, it was all the labor that such a person has performed uh, in so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. So we have to be very careful what we're doing. The whole point is when we want to become a devotee, we have to actually become a genuine devotee and fully dedicated in Krishna consciousness and being able to control our mind and senses and always in anger and lust and greed and always being kind and gentle in our behavior and always engaged in devotional service without getting angry, without getting lusty, and so forth. So it's a lifetime of self control in Krishna consciousness. Most people are not completely self controlled, and sometimes they become really angry in situations. But a devotee is always self controlled and does not become overly angered by whatever happens because they know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality. He's in the heart of every living entity. No one can really act, do anything without the sanction of the Lord. So if there is some discrepancy, the devotee becomes extremely patient and waits to see what the decision of the Lord is instead of becoming the judge and the executioner. Sometimes people like to be the judge and the executioner. That's why in the material world, there's a difference between the judge and the executioner. The judge makes a decision, but then there's somebody else that has to uh, do the execution of the culprit. So that way, the judge's hands are clean. All he did was make a decision, but somebody else does the dirty work. Uh, so in this case, uh, Krishna is based the way he's speaking. He's making a point to the Kumaras that maybe they made a mistake by over punishing Jaya and Vijay. And now the four Kumaras are thinking, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should have not have been so harsh. We always have to be careful what we do. Therefore, it's very good to get validation from a bona fide devotee before we make major decisions in our life. And that's what you would call the safety uh, the safety belt or the safe belt.
Safety net.
Safety net, yeah, safety net. Otherwise, if we just think, oh, I know exactly what to do, and you go and make a decision, and then it turns out to be a disaster, and then you go to the guru and say, what am I going to do? And the guru says, well, you should have asked me before you did what you did, right? You didn't ask me, you just went ahead and did it, thinking you know what to do. So therefore, when someone gets initiated, before they do anything, they should ask the guru. Otherwise, why did they accept the guru? It was to get good advice in all situations, and to be sure that whatever they're doing is acceptable by Krishna. So that means you can't make these. You can't be uh, like a cowboy and shoot from the hip, as they say, shoot from the hip. You draw your gun real quick and you shoot and kill someone. You have to get validation. Is what I'm doing the right thing or not the right thing? So the Kumaras, uh, Krishna comes after the Kumaras cursing Jai and Vijay, and he starts talking to them. And basically, he's saying, actually, I'm responsible for what they did. And the Kumaras become confused and they start thinking, well, maybe we made a mistake here. Okay. So, uh, okay. So there are many different concepts of what, should be worshipped and what is the finality of that worship. And Prabhupada says, well, first of all, the verse says, Kumaras are speaking, I think, you are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities. And by your multi manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles. And in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable. And in the purport, it says the statement in this verse, Dharmasya Paramo Guya, refers to the most confidential part of all religious principles. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. Well, when it says just surrender unto me, it basically it's saying don't do anything that would be unpleasing to Krishna. So you have to get his advice before you do something. You shouldn't just jump to a conclusion and do something. You have to get the advice of Krishna. And so if you say, well, Krishna's not here, but if you have a bona fide guru, then you have to get the advice of the guru before you make that big jump or big decision. So a disciple will never do anything without getting the advice of the bona fide guru or gurus. So, this is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. Give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me, Krishna said. Bhagavatam also it is stated that if one does not become Krishna conscious after very rigidly executing one's specified religious duties, all his labor in following so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. Here also the sages confirm the statement that the Supreme Lord, not the demigods, is the ultimate goal of all religious principles. There are many foolish propagandists who say that worship of the demigods is also a way to reach the supreme goal. But in the authorized statements of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, this is not accepted. Bhagavad Gita says that one who worships a particular demigod can reach the demigod's planet, but one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead enter into Vaikuntha. Some propagandists say that regardless of what one does, he will ultimately reach the supreme abode of the personality of Godhead. But this is not valid. The Lord is eternal. The Lord's servitor is eternal. And the Lord's abode is also eternal. They are all described here as sanatana, or eternal. The result of devotional service, therefore, is not temporary, as is the achievement of heavenly planets by worshiping the demigods. The sages wanted to stress that although the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, says that he worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, actually the Lord is worshipable not only by the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, but also by the demigods. Okay, let me read that again. The sages wanted to stress that although the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, says that he worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, actually, the Lord is worshipable not only by the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, but also by the demigods. Now, why is it saying that? Let me see why that is. Okay, the statement in this verse, you are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities. And by your multi-manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles. And in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally. So, what is being said here by the four Kumaras? And these are prayers, actually. These type of prayers can be recited by a devotee on a daily basis, and the Lord will be very pleased because the statements in these prayers are all bona fide. So four Kumaras are able to see Krishna. And it says, they experienced a thrill throughout their bodies. They then spoke as follows to the Lord, who had revealed the multi-glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his internal potency, Yoga Maya. So the Lord is giving special mercy to the four Kumaras. And in the purport, I'm going back now to verse 15. The sages were almost too puzzled to speak before the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the first time. And the hairs of their bodies stood erect due to their extreme joy. The highest opulence in the material world is called paramestya, the opulence of Brahma. But that material opulence of Brahma, who lives on the topmost planet within this material world, cannot compare to the opulence of the Supreme Lord, because the transcendental opulence in the spiritual world is caused by Yoga Maya, whereas the opulence in the material world is caused by Mahamaya. So, the four Kumaras say, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, we are unable to know what you intend for us to do. For even though you are the supreme ruler of all, you speak in our favor as if we have done something good for you. And the purport says, the sages could understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is above everyone, was speaking as if he were in the wrong. So in other words, the four Kumaras very quickly cursed Jai and Vijay. And they protect the entrance to Vaikuntha. And after they curse the Brahmanas to go fall down into the material world, Krishna appears and he says, well, basically he says, if they made a mistake, it's my mistake. And he was speaking as if he were in the wrong. Therefore, it was difficult for the Kumaras to understand the words of the Lord. They could understand, however, that the Lord was speaking in such a humble way just to show them his all merciful favor. And that's the real point, just to show them, who the four Kumaras, uh, the Lord's all merciful favor. So he's giving them all merciful favor, and they gave the Jai and Vijay, let's say, not all merciful favor. Okay. And now they speak. They say, "Oh Lord, you're the supreme director of the Brahminical culture. You're considering the Brahmanas to be in the highest position is your example for teaching others. Actually, you are the supreme worshipable deity, not only for the gods, but for the Brahmanas also." And then the purport says, in the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. There are undoubtedly many demigods, the chiefs of whom are Brahma and Shiva. Lord Vishnu is the Lord of Brahma and Shiva, not to speak of the Brahmanas in this material world. As mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord is very favorable towards all activities performed according to Brahminical culture, or the qualities of control of the senses and mind, cleanliness, forbearance. And we looked at the meaning of forbearance, right? Being very liberal and very merciful. Faith in scripture, and practical and theoretical knowledge. The Lord is the super soul of everyone. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord is the source of all emanations. Thus, he is also the source of Brahma and Shiva. Okay, so let's go back to text 18. Let's go to text 18. You are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities, and by your multi-manifestations of personalities, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles, and in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally. So here, the Kumaras are glorifying the Lord, uh, and they're doing a good job, and they're saying things that are absolutely true. So, what are they doing actually? They've made a mistake, and they realize it, and they're completely surrendering to Krishna. And the same thing, the conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is, give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. In the Bhagavad Gita, also it is stated that if one does not become Krishna conscious after rigidly executing one's specified religious duties, all his labor in following so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. That's a very heavy statement. Here also, the sages confirm the statement that the Supreme Lord, not the demigods, is the ultimate goal of all religious principles. There are many foolish propagandists who say that worship of the demigods is also a way to reach the supreme goal. But in the authorized statements of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, this is not accepted. Bhagavad Gita says that one who worships a particular demigod can reach the demigod's planet, but one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead can enter into Vaikuntha. Some propagandists say that regardless of what one does, he will ultimately reach the supreme abode of the Personality of Godhead, but this is not valid. The Lord is eternal, and the Lord's servitor is eternal, and the Lord's abode is also eternal. They are all described here as sanatana, or eternal. The result of devotional service, therefore, is not temporary, as is the achievement of heavenly planets by worshiping the demigods. The sages wanted to stress that although the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, says that he worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, actually the Lord is worshipable not only by the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, but also by the demigods. Now, is that a right statement? Okay, we'll have to go further to understand that.
I mean, even in the previous verse, it was mentioned, right? Just the 16.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry, 17. It says, actually, you are supreme worshipable deity, not only for the gods, but also for the Brahmins. So
All right.
it's stating the same thing here.
And then he's setting as an example of setting an example by worshipping Brahmanas and cows, Krishna. But even though he's doing that, but he is actually the worshipable.
Okay. All right, let me go to text 19. Mystics and transcendentalists, by the mercy of the Lord, cross beyond nescience or ignorance by ceasing all material desires. It is not possible, therefore, that the Supreme Lord can be favored by others. It is not possible, therefore, that the Supreme Lord can be favored by others. Purport: unless one is favored by the Supreme Lord, one cannot cross over the ocean of the nescience of repeated birth and death. Here it is stated that yogis or mystics cross beyond nescience by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are many kinds of mystics, such as the karma yogi, jnana yogi, dhyana yogi, and bhakti yogi. The karmis particularly searched after the favor of the demigods. The jnanis want to become one with the supreme absolute truth. And the yogis are satisfied simply by partial vision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, and ultimately by oneness with him. But the bhaktas, the devotees, want to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead eternally and serve him. It has already been admitted that the Lord is eternal, and those who want the favor of the Supreme Lord perpetually are also eternal. Therefore, yogis here means devotees. By the mercy of the Lord, devotees can easily pass beyond the ignorance or nescience of birth and death and attain the eternal abode of the Lord. The Lord is therefore not in need of any of another's favor, because no one is equal to or greater than him. Actually, everyone needs the favor of the Lord for successful understanding of his human mission. In other words, don't worship the demigods. Just worship Lord Krishna. Even if you have material desires, don't go to the demigods and go to Krishna. Why? Because if you go to Krishna, there's a very good chance that he'll purify those material desires. He might give you those material desires, but in the process, you'll become purified by wanting any more material desires. So it's much more auspicious to go to Krishna, even with material desires, than to go to the demigods. Text 20. The goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, the dust of whose feet is worn on the head by others, waits upon you as appointed, for she is anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hovers on the fresh wreath of tulsi leaves offered at your lotus feet by some blessed devotee. This is poetry now. This is big time poetry. Purport: as previously described, Tulsi has attained all superior qualities due to being placed at the lotus feet of the Lord. The comparison made here is very nice. As the king of bees hovers over the tulsi leaves offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, So Lakshmi, the goddess who is sought by the demigods, Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and everyone else, always engages in rendering service to the lotus feet of the Lord. The conclusion is that no one can be the benefactor of the Lord. Everyone is actually the servant of the Lord. Yeah, very good. So if you uh, bow down to the lotus feet of Lakshmi Devi, but at the same time you're afraid of bees, you'll be surprised. uh, it is uh, so, but Lakshmi Devi herself always engages in rendering service to the lotus feet of the Lord. So you have to be the servant of the Lord, or the servant of the Lord. And that's better than simply being the servant of the Lord.
What can be benefactor of Lord? Means, but the Lord is the
Benefactor of everyone. Yeah. So that means that
we're not giving anything to him.
if you act as the benefactor of the Lord, that's sacrilegious. The Lord doesn't need our benediction. We need his benediction. Okay, next verse.
First time.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll stop there. Are there any questions?
Any questions online or?
Okay, Haripol, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And Hare Krishna and be happy all day today.
Hare
Hare Krishna.